I'm Merryana Salem, aka Mary. I'm a Lebanese Aboriginal bisexual woman.
Hello, I'm Durr-e Haque, aka Dea. I'm an Indonesian Pakistani non-binary lesbian.
We are two writers who love movies, television, and books, especially when they're gay.
And welcome to GayV Club, where we'll be analysing LGBT texts
that we like, that we don't like, and how we relate to these texts as gay people of colour.
Welcome to episode 5!
Yeah! Woo!
Thanks so much for listening to us so far. If you like GayV Club, please follow, subscribe, rate us on wherever you listen to podcasts. Let your friends know. We also have a YouTube channel where you can listen to us with closed captions.
Yes. And follow us on the socials.
Yeah, at GayV_Club on Twitter and Instagram.
Woohoo! Alright, so today we're doing our Goldfinch miniseries pitch. The Goldfinch is a 2013 novel by Donna Tartt, which was adapted this year into a terrible film by John Crowley and, you know, the guy who wrote the Snowman movie, apparently.
Why don't you just read the blurb of the Goldfinch? Please, Mary.
I don't have it. Okay. So, it begins with a boy, Theo Decker, a 13-year-old New Yorker, miraculously survives an accident that kills his mother. Abandoned by his father, Theo is taken in by the family of a wealthy friend. Bewildered by his strange new home on Park Avenue, disturbed by schoolmates who don't know how to talk to him, and tormented above all by his unbearable longing for his mother, he clings to the one thing that reminds him of her. A small, mysteriously captivating painting that ultimately draws Theo into the underworld of art. In this episode, we're going to review the film and pitch our own limited series adaptation, because the movie was not only a homophobic mess, but just like
cinematic taxidermy.
Yep.
We will be discussing issues of homophobia, drug and alcohol abuse, child abuse, and suicide, so please be safe and listen at your discretion. Also, if you haven't read or seen The Goldfinch and you're planning to do one or both of these things, probably stop listening now, because this is also kind of going to be a Goldfinch explained episode. I've been a fan of this novel basically since it came out, and the annoying thing about this film this year is that it had all the right pieces to be great. Like, it's based on a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. Roger Deakins was the DP. The director had already made a Best Picture nom. Peter Straughan, the screenwriter, even though we just ripped on him for writing The Snowman, he did also write Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. You had Nicole Kidman in this movie.
Yeah.
You had Jeffrey Wright. You had Sarah Paulson, like the talent. I also remember reading like the production designer worked on No Country for Old Men, and just
fantastic.
There are so many other people working on the film who were just like immensely talented working on this project, which, you know, it would make you think that this movie was going to be good.
Yeah, it's like this movie is too Oscar-y to fail, you know?
Yeah, but that's exactly why it failed.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was just like a really inorganic assortment of talent pulled together by Warner Brothers Studios and Amazon Studios to just make Oscar bait, which backfired, basically.
Yep. Oh.
Like, the film rightfully flopped. It's 2.5 hours of garbage made by...
I don't think garbage is the right word, because it's not garbage, it's so well produced. It's not really garbage, it's just nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, it's just...
It doesn't make any sense. I have not met a single person who hasn't read the book, who watched it, who actually understood what was going on.
Honestly, even as someone who read the book, like, I was sort of sitting there going, whoa, what? Why have you put things in this order?
It just feels like there's whole chunks missing out of this movie. The reason that we are talking about this on GayV Club is because The Goldfinch is ultimately a story of gay repression and unhealthy coping mechanisms, which, you know, is Donna Tartt's domain. The protagonist, Theo Decker, and his childhood friend Boris are gay and just won't talk about it.
That is the saddest in this novel. It is
extremely sad.
There's a lot of sad things in this novel, but that is, like, in the top 3 things.
And also, like, that's why I feel this story resonates so much with people our age. One could make the argument for bisexuality, but I feel that that's insulting to bisexuals.
Yeah.
Given how terrible all their relationships are.
I think Theo more than Boris. Like, you could make a more convincing argument for Theo, but even then, definitely not Boris. All his relationships with women are just... They're horrible. They're horrible. They're terrible. He doesn't... You can tell there's no genuine... Like, he's sort of just going through the motions of those because he knows what's expected of him. Theo, the only reason I think you can make a kind of semi-decent one is because of Pippa, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. Okay.
The reason we are pitching a mini-series or a limited series for the Goldfinch, not a movie, because, well, one thing, y'all seen this thick-ass book? Like, I just hate how dense this book is. Like, when Dee gave it to me to read, I was like, oh, that looks thick, but I bet the font is big. No! No, it's so tiny and the margins are so small. There were times when even reading this book in perfect light, I was like, I understand how old people feel like reading books. I couldn't. Oh my goodness, it's so much. Donna Tartt doesn't even divide it into chapters. There's like some Roman numeral like chapters.
There's the big chapters and then there's sub-chapters.
Oh my god. Okay, but yeah, look, the basic reason we're pitching as a mini-series is because obviously this book needs more time than 2.5 hours.
Yeah, you really, because this story is just all about dwelling on what's happened, I think. Also, I just love miniseries. I've always loved miniseries, and I think they've definitely had a pretty good resurgence, like critically, in the last 5 years, and quite a few of them have been based on books.
Yes.
Like, for instance, these are bad examples because I personally don't like Jean-Marc Vallée, but first season of Big Little Lies, that was
really
that
excellent.
was immensely successful.
Sharp Objects.
So was Sharp Objects.
Sharp Objects is weird because if you hadn't read the book, you would think it was good. You know.
Same with Big Little Lies.
Yeah, but because we've read the books, we thought no. Sharp Objects was almost like so good. I was like loving it so much, and then they just completely screwed it over. But yeah, Chernobyl, another one.
And also the BBC has been adapting freaking Jane Austen and a bunch of other things to miniseries for ages. So it's not impossible. I do want to say, I don't think it's impossible to make The Goldfinch into a good film. Like, because there are plenty of long novels that have been adapted quite recently into really good films. For instance, The Fingersmith was adapted into The Handmaiden, and also this year, Personal History of David Copperfield, which is literally like one of the longest English language novels in the world. That got adapted pretty decently into a 2-hour movie this year, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I just like miniseries in general as a format. Like,
I do too, because I think it's nice when people go, I know what I need to say, I know exactly how much time I need to say it, so this is what I'm going to do to say it.
Yeah,
you know
and
what
also
I mean?
the risk of just regular serialized TV is like you have the risk of new writers, all these changes, and like it just
like what happened in Big
like
Little Lies season 2. Yeah.
Just really bad continuity in general behind the scenes. So it's good to just have everything done all at once.
Yeah. And also I think miniseries are great as well, and this is more from a production standpoint, but you can have people in a miniseries involved like both as crew and cast that are like really top tier actors, because top tier actors are more likely to commit to something that's a short term thing than they are for like a 10-season show. So that's why like I think it's great we're seeing a lot more miniseries, because we're seeing a lot more like movie people who would typically more like lean towards movies.
Like TV's getting so good.
Yeah, because people
and
like
expensive.
Yeah. That's a whole other episode. But no, I definitely think The Goldfinch is perfectly suited to being a limited miniseries. When, with that being said, shall we get into our episode by episode pitch? Do you have any words to say about the movie before we proceed?
We're gonna be talking about the movie as we go along, I think.
Okay. So a couple of details about our miniseries before we give the episode by episode pitch. We do want, like, this is set in an imaginary world where we can have whatever we want.
Yeah, where our budget is $1 bajillion.
Yep. And we have all the connections
required to get whoever we want to make this.
To get whatever we want.
Who do you want directing this series?
Joe Wright.
Absolutely.
Yes. For people who may be listening and not sure who Joe Wright is, think Pride and Prejudice 2005.
Think Atonement. Think Anna Karenina. Think Hannah. Think the Nosedive episode of Black Mirror.
Aesthetically.
I know. Yeah.
Yes, so Joe Wright, absolutely. Though we do have a half-formed idea to get Xavier Dolan in to direct one episode just for fun.
Yeah, just for fun.
Yeah.
I would love that. Actually, like, we mentioned that the movie already had a pretty great amount of talent working on it. Like, I'm fairly happy with the casting overall. I don't like Ansel Elgort, though.
I would actually be really happy if we had the power, and I'm a firm believer in this, but like just casting someone not necessarily based on like whether they've got a rap sheet or whatever the rep or the star power. You know? I just want to cast people like because I think they're good, not because they're like famous or whatever.
Yeah, I did love it. Was literally like a dream come true when they announced the casting for Boris, because I have loved Aaron Barnard since The White Queen, and so him playing one of my favorite characters in a book was the dream. And I don't think he let me down, but he didn't get enough screen time to.
No, but I think that's partly like a fault of the format they chose.
Yeah, he just rocks in 1 hour and 52 minutes into the movie, and it's like, it's too late for me to save this. I'm going to do everything I can for the LGBT community.
I think the standout, though, for the movie is little Theo. His kid
yes,
Theo.
Oaks Begley was great.
Oh, he had my heart, that little boy.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want him to grow into Ansel Elgort because I was like, no, you don't deserve that.
I know. It's like, you're going to grow into someone I hate.
Yep. I can't believe that Ansel Elgort has single-handedly, like, just disappointed me in playing two separate characters that have a significant arc that happens to them in Amsterdam. I was disappointed when he was cast in Fault in Our Stars, and I was disappointed watching him here. Like, please stop casting Ansel Elgort in things where he has to go to Amsterdam and have a life-changing experience, okay? Just stop. It spells disaster.
It's really crazy just seeing Goldfinch fans actually decide that they liked Ansel Elgort. And honestly, while promoting the movie, I don't know what algorithm that he was using, like what marketing algorithm he was using, but it was spot on. He was saying all the right things, doing all the right memes. And oh my god, remember how last episode we talked about how whenever straight actors were playing gay characters, they would have to they would conveniently have that kind of
they have an anecdote, a prepared non-hetero anecdote.
Yeah. Well, you probably listened to this and were like, what? My favorite A24 white boys didn't have this when they were doing coming-of-age gay films. Well, there's the anecdote option, which Keira Knightley, etc. had. And then there's the Ansel Elgort, Timothée Chalamet, and Lucas Hedges did, which is basically be like, I'm not gay, but I've never had relationships with guys, but
love is love.
Love is love. I don't love a gender.
I love a spirit. I love a soul.
I don't know exactly what this. Please just Google what Ansel Elgort said in particular about this, because it doesn't make any sense. Also, it's so funny.
Also Google like how he uploaded like 20 shirtless pictures of himself when the trailer dropped for some reason.
Yeah. And like his justification of that.
But anyway,
it's ridiculous.
I'm pretty much, and I think the other perfect casting obviously is Nicole Kidman as Mrs. Barber.
Mm-hmm. All the adults are cast so well in that movie.
Yep.
Like, you have Nicole Kidman as Mrs. Barber, you have Jeffrey Wright as Hobie. As soon as I knew that, like, I knew he was going to make me cry, because I just love Jeffrey Wright.
I also really
Sarah Paulson as Xandra.
And I really actually thought that, I forget his name. Is
Luke Wilson?
Luke Wilson as the dad was like really perfect casting. He's like perfect,
washed up actor.
Sleazy. I know. I was like, I love he's laughing at himself in this. That takes the ability to laugh at yourself to do that, and I admire that in someone. No, I really like all the adult actors.
So yeah, I'm pretty happy with everyone except Ansel Elgort, I guess.
I know.
Swap him out with someone like, I don't know.
Someone unknown or... Yeah.
Someone Nick Robinson-ish, but not Nick Robinson.
Someone who's got Ben Wishaw's talent, but isn't Ben Wishaw. So, episode 1. We open on the prologue of Theo in Amsterdam, though we don't know. The viewer doesn't know it's Theo. We just maybe see hands, like, going through...
Yeah, close-up shots of hands.
That's a close-up shots of hands. Which we know Joe Wright, he digs that. He'll be good for that. And we see him, as he is in the book, being very paranoid, looking through newspapers, but we don't know why. And there's probably a little bit of a voiceover.
Yeah, just everything that he says.
Everything
so that we know
he's thinking.
What it's leading up to. One thing that I did like about at the end of the book is they kind of talk about the journey of the Goldfinch painting and all the different ways that it has been nearly destroyed and lost and survived throughout history. So I thought we could open each episode with just a flashback, I guess, to a specific event. So I think with the first episode, we could, for instance, just do, I don't know, a fake mock-up of Fabricius, like, actually painting the Goldfinch. Like, that would be nice, I think. And then, like, for instance, the second episode could be the actual gunpowder factory explosion that Fabricius died in, that the Goldfinch miraculously survived.
Yes.
And then each episode we can just go through
and
new ones.
at the end of these little, like, vignettes is when we show the title card of, like, the Goldfinch. And then, like, we can be like, part 1. Or episode 1. Or chapter 1. Chapter 1, just to flex on Donna Tartt and be like, this what chapters look like, bitch.
Sure. Then I guess begin back to the story, as the book does, with, like, all the fuss of walking around the city, Theo being hungry, like the rain starting, and he and his mom just ducking into the Metropolitan Museum.
Yes. Also, like, sort of making it clear why they're there, because Theo has to meet with the principal.
Yeah. I guess what I hated so much about the movie is, even though the story is very much about stress, it's like, you know, this is a very before and after moment in Theo's life. You don't see enough of the before. You don't actually understand what's happening.
No.
So
you don't understand how it's affected him so deeply, what's happened to him, because we never see what he was before.
You never even see his mother.
I know.
Like, they just make her into this weird ghost that you don't even see her face until maybe the last act, and, like, they try to phantom thread her into the story. It's really stupid.
Yes. So obviously the first episode is mostly focusing on the explosion. So Theo's life before and the explosion that happens at the art gallery that changes his life forever, where his mother dies, and also where he steals the painting. One of my favorite things reading the book was learning about Theo's little family, like his little found family with the doorman. Like, all the scenes with the doorman at his
lovely.
building, they're so nice, and they really, like, look out for him. Movie doesn't even bother, like, with any of those people or any of them, not even the cleaner lady that comes to their apartment who his mum is good friends with, who looks after Theo. Just all the little details about Theo's life, and to really give you the impression of how much his life is completely obliterated by this explosion in so many ways.
Yeah, and, like, when the explosion actually happens, I think the big mistake that the movie made was trying to make everything in general just as painless as possible. But that's, like, such a misunderstanding of it, because it's a very painful story.
Yes.
And genuinely, like, I really wanted it to feel the way that the book feels, of Theo just, like, crawling through the rubble. Like, that took me days to read.
When you read that,
because it was so awful.
It's so tense. You feel like crying. You can really feel how anxious Theo is, how scared he is, but also, like, how numb he is and how confused he is. Like, it's...
Like, we need at least 20 minutes of that. And, like, you know, people might say that, oh, no one's going to want to watch that. People watch Chernobyl.
But Chernobyl actually does that quite well. Like, that can be done very well. Like, watching people suffer in a situation and just tensing the audience. I watched, like, a really cool video essay on how Chernobyl, like, actually does that really well. And the way they do it is basically you're always experiencing the disaster from a new point of view, which makes you tense up because you know more than the person who's experiencing it. Yeah. And that makes you really, like, tensing up. And that's something you could sort of almost do the explosion if you wanted, like, not just with Theo, but you could show, like, Welty as well. And to increase the confusion. Yeah, and
actually include Welty and the whole conversation that he has with Welty where he hands over the ring. I really hated that the movie just, like, moved it up, but also we've already been introduced to the fact that Theo had the ring and to Theo meeting Hobie, but we don't actually know why he even went to Hobart and Blackwell. And, like, by the time you actually get that scene, it's like you don't even need it anymore, which is so stupid. The big mistake about this movie is that it's in non-chronological order.
If I were to make a Goldfinch movie, I would simply put everything in chronological order. Like, rip to John Crowley, but I'm different.
Like, there are stories where non-chronological order is great, but this is not one of them. This is one of those stories
Crowley,
where
you are not the Nolan brothers. You cannot do the non-chronological order thing well enough to justify doing it in this. Also, this story just really isn't something you can experience out of chronological order because it removes the urgency and the sadness of what you're in Because, like, when you're...
This is a sad story. Like, it's supposed to be sad. Like, obviously not everyone can handle that, and that's fine. But
that doesn't mean it shouldn't be, like, you shouldn't do justice to it. Which I think is why it's important that we see Theo crawl through that rubble, crawl through that dust.
We need to be there with him every step of the way.
We literally needed to have it so that the audience is like, oh, is he actually going to get out of this? Like,
yeah. Which you don't really get from the movie, because you cut from him being miserable in one situation to him being an adult suddenly, and it's like, oh, so he did get out of it, I guess. Like, you don't really have that question. The thing about the Goldfinch novel is you really don't know how Theo is going to survive any of this. And the only indication that you have is how much left of the book you have, really.
And also the prologue in Amsterdam. You know he eventually gets there. But, like, this book is so intense in places you're not even sure if he will get there, even though you technically know that he will. But yes, so after the rubble, after we make sure we show Welty giving him the ring, and Welty gives him the Goldfinch, doesn't he? The actual painting? Isn't it Welty that gives him the painting?
No, Welty's kind of just like, take it, and then Theo, like, he's just like, you have to take it, and Theo doesn't really know what he's talking about, but he sees the Goldfinch, and he wants to take it for his mom, I think. And but Theo... no, I don't want us to show Theo actually taking the Goldfinch, because it doesn't actually do that.
No, it doesn't show you in the book, and I was confused for a while, actually, like, what he was talking about. So, yeah.
Then we cut to outside of the museum, and, like, all the chaos that's going on, and Theo running home and waiting for his mom, I guess.
And I think while he's waiting for his mum, like, in the apartment, that would be sort of a good time to have little flashbacks to his life before. So he could, like, see objects in the apartment and go, oh, that's right, that's where Mum and I went to. You know, because he talks about specific things his mum and him would do. Like,
even just, like, passing, like, places where his mum had been with him.
And that gives you a good idea of what it had been like before. Of course, the cops obviously show up to little Theo's house.
And social workers. Yeah, social workers. Of those, whatever.
One of those comes to his house, and he is informed that his mother has died. Also, I really would like us to show, like, you know, how he calls the helpline over and over again, like, looking for his mum. That's the most horrible part of that chapter, is that no one actually wants to help him. He's literally, like, covered in dust and explosion and blood. And nobody really does anything. Even when he rings up and is like, I was in the explosion, my mum was in the explosion, I'm trying to find her, they're like, oh, really? Like, they don't even believe him.
Wait, how old are you? Yeah.
So I really want to amp up that frustration and that suspense. And, of course, we will end with Theo being taken in by the Barbers, his best friend from, like, primary school, Andy's family, who are, like, very wealthy, like, disgusting. But, like, good for Theo, I guess. He's got someone to look after him.
You really like Andy.
I do like Andy, which we'll get into in episode 2. Because we're going to end with
that line that Andy tells him.
That lovely line where he's like, I'm sorry things are so fucked up. And Theo's like, oh, I've got a friend, that's nice. So episode 2, of course, begins with the vignette of the painting surviving the explosion, as you mentioned. Yeah, the
first gunpowder factory explosion where Fabricius died. The painting survived. Now we have Theo's life at the Barbers. I think flashbacks of his life with his mother.
Building up the fear of his father and why he's estranged from his father. But also with this episode, I really think it's important to show his friendship with Andy.
Yes.
Because I know a lot of people who read this book are all about that Boris and Theo life, which is fine. But I don't know. I think my darling boy, Andy Barber, who was just like a good friend to Theo when he was all alone in the world, you know, didn't get him onto vodka and friggin' drugs and all this stuff. Alright, he was just a good, nerdy pal who, yes, may have become a weeaboo later in life. But, but I don't think we can, you know... He's just so nice. And he, like, covers for Theo when Theo's going to investigate all that stuff about the ring and all that stuff.
Yeah, we have Theo meeting Hobie in this episode.
Yep.
Which, oh man, and meeting Pippa properly.
The important thing we need to emphasize in episode 2 is Theo is actually building some very healthy coping mechanisms to what has happened. Yeah, he's building,
like, a support network for what's been happening to him, meeting up with the doorman from his old building. and organizing that. And also, I guess we find out that he also stole the painting in this episode. Oops.
Well, whoops. I
but
like
yeah.
in the book how he doesn't even really realize that he's stolen the painting. Like,
yeah, he's just like, oh yeah, I was just saving it. Like, I thought it would be, because he wanted to take it to his mother, like, to make her happy. It's so sad.
It's so sad.
But yeah, basically.
But we meet Hobie, we see him learning to build the antiques in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
We see him hanging with Andy, falling slowly back to life at school.
Yeah, and him meeting Pippa properly for the first time. And
which Pippa is important
I
to
love
Theo.
Pippa so much.
Pippa is important because it's someone who experienced the same thing he did
Mm-hmm.
and actually understands what he's going through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that friendship is important even if it's pretty messed up. Like,
yeah.
I still think it's an important thing for him to have. I really love those first scenes with Theo and Pippa.
Yeah.
And I also just love how honest Pippa is. Like, she never
Mm-hmm.
loses that, even when she gets older. But
Yeah.
we'll talk about that.
So yeah, we have Theo learning how to cope, building support networks for himself, which is why it's so scary when at the end of the episode his dad and Xandra actually show up to take him away from all that.
And also, yeah, by this point, because...
It's like the rug's pulled from under him.
Yeah. We've seen enough flashbacks of Theo's dad. I don't think you need to actually a lot of flashbacks to convey it.
No, not a huge amount.
We
just need to know that his dad stole from his mom, was awful to his mom.
Was
like
an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Which I think that's an interesting aspect to this book. I don't think it's like the intergenerational. If you have someone who is a parent who didn't have healthy coping mechanisms, like you have no one to learn to have like that from. So yeah, you really feel like at the end of this episode, and I think the movie still managed to do this reasonably well. Like, I still felt kind of devastated because he's so, like, little baby Theo is so excited when Mrs. Barber is like, do you want to come to Maine with us this year? And he's like, yes, oh my God. And then he comes home and he's bought, like, stuff for the boat. And he's like, I bought the sand shoes you wanted. And she just looks at him like, oh, I've got a lovely surprise for you, Theo. Like,
and she's... Nicole Kidman is so great.
All the scenes with...
Oh, yeah. This is one thing that I really did love about the movie, is that there was a lot more about the dynamic between Theo and Mrs. Barber, which is, you know, that there's just, like, that quick scene where Theo wakes up from a nightmare and, like, then it cuts to Mrs. Barber waking up because she hears him. Like, that hit me really hard.
It does.
The book kind of talks about how he didn't realize just how much Mrs. Barber was actually protecting him at the time.
No.
From all the reporters and such about the incident. Yeah.
The only thing I didn't like, and I'm not sure if the movie intended this, was that it sort of framed Mrs. Barber as a little bit complicit in Theo's dependence on drugs. There's a scene, I don't think it's meant like that, but like when you see it in relation to the way Xandra gives him pills, there's not a lot of difference between those scenes. Mrs. Barber gives Theo the pills in the movie. She's like, oh, this will help you sleep, you know, like this will help you relax and be a little less scared. And like, that's meant to be
that's
like...
a great thing to just...
That's... Yeah,
and
he
to a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah, she doesn't even tell him what it is. She's like, this will help you sleep. And then, you know, less than 10 minutes later, you have almost a very similar scene with Xandra where poor little Theo, because he doesn't like being in crowds because it freaks him out, is freaking out at the airport, and the dad's just like to Xandra, like, give him one of those pills. Yeah. And she just like shoves one. And I'm like, this is not really different to what Mrs. Barber was doing. And that was the only thing I didn't really like, was them framing Mrs. Barber, not showing enough of what Mrs. Barber like did for Theo in terms of keeping reporters away, and just showing that and making her complicit in that. I wasn't very comfortable with. But anyway, we end episode 2 with all of that network building and healthy coping mechanism building, like,
just being taken away from Theo, because that's very much how it feels. One thing as well, I didn't like how you cut from Theo at the Barbers straight to adult Theo reuniting with the Barbers. That was a really bad thing that the film did, in that, like, you don't even miss the Barbers long enough to really even care. Like, there's not enough momentum being built. Like, every time this story builds momentum, it just cuts backwards or forwards in time.
That's because they didn't put it in order. You can't build momentum if you're doing things out of order. And that was just part of that whole thing. It's like how when you're reunited with Boris, when Theo is reunited, I say you, but we're the reader, so. But when we're reunited with Boris, that's meant to be like, whoa, that's meant to be like a huge rush because we
Mhm.
haven't seen him in so long. Like, it's been so many. But in the movie, it's like you just saw him in a flashback. So it's sort of like, oh.
Also, another thing I hate is that we are introduced to Kitsy as an adult before we are even introduced to Boris as a teenager.
There's that scene where he says to Kitsy, like, oh,
It's the homophobia.
But also, it's like, there's that scene where Kitsy's like, we were so mean to you when you were here. And they've never shown any footage of that.
Footage not found.
Mm.
That's the whole thing about this movie, is like, it really feels like there are just huge chunks missing out of it. And like, you really feel like, where's the rest of this? Where is the rest of this movie?
Oh, I know. But we're on to episode 3 and episode 4. The Holy Grails. But let's start with episode 3, obviously, because we're not John Crowley and we do things in chronological order.
Yes. Okay.
So this is Las Vegas Part 1. Essentially his first year in Vegas. Oh, I love the Vegas sequence in this book, not only because of the Boris Theo element, that's obvious, but also because I love Las Vegas as a gothic aesthetic.
Yes.
Like, not many things do this with Vegas, which doesn't really make sense to me because Vegas is ripe for gothic isolation. Like, it's so isolated, it's so, like, liminal. The people that live there don't even really live there. And one thing
Just say you love Fright Night.
I do love Fright Night. But I also loved the Hangover movies because they were, like, all seedy and gross. And I know that's a really controversial opinion to have, but when I was growing up, I really liked them, mostly because I liked the idea that Vegas was, like, this really horror place, you know?
Blade Runner 2049.
Yes!
I loved that as well.
I love that sequence in Blade Runner 2049. I love in the Resident Evil, I think it's Resident Evil 2, there's a whole sequence in, like, abandoned Vegas, which is, like, awesome. Just abandoned Vegas, and Vegas rotting is so good. And that's what I mainly want out of this sequence, other than Boris and Theo, obviously, is just the complete desolation. That's what it's meant to be, like, not to get all English teacher on you, but, like, the reason I feel like that's in Vegas is because it's meant to reflect how desolate Theo's life is of any kind of...
He's literally in the middle of the desert, just stranded.
Stranded, yeah. Like, it's meant to feel like that. And one thing that frustrated me about the movie is that it didn't really utilize that aesthetic.
And Donna Tartt is all about that aesthetic.
I know. One thing I
the aesthetic, I mean, just in general. But
one thing I do semi-respect her for. Obviously, so, yes, this is Vegas Gothic. I have a list on Letterboxd of movies that I think do get Vegas Gothic really well. I'm going to take this movie off it, though, because I don't think it does it well enough.
No, it doesn't.
I'm so sad. But anyway,
So, we meet Boris.
Woo!
We should probably give you a rundown on Boris, I guess, just to try to explain him.
Okay, so Boris is the main love interest / antagonist of this.
Antagonist? Okay. I mean, actually, you're right.
I am right.
You're right. Oh my god, he is.
Yeah. People are usually so distracted by how he's Theo's best friend. He's also the antagonist. You can't make all those memes about Boris ruining Theo's life and then be shocked that he's the antagonist of the novel.
Like, I don't know. I've never actually heard anyone say it out loud. You're so. This is why I love you.
But I love you too. But yeah. So he's Theo's best friend and sort of the.
Who he meets in Vegas.
Yes.
He is a Ukrainian child.
He is also a very poorly raised.
They both have alcoholic fathers. They don't have a mother anymore. Basically, like,
their fathers are like very absentee, like not really involved in their upbringing at all. Even when they're not being alcoholic, they're just sort of devoid of affection.
Yeah, and I guess because Boris has always had like a very peripatetic lifestyle, I guess. Like, he's had to live all over the world. One thing about Boris that I would specifically like to change from the movie is that Boris actually has an Australian Russian accent, because the thing about Boris is he grew up all over the place in so many countries, and the country where he learned to speak English was Australia. And the book has so many moments where Boris pronounces a word and then in brackets it'll be like he pronounced it in this Australian way.
Yeah.
And
and it was weird because I was like, I don't need these brackets. I know exactly what he's saying.
I know. And just
because in your head you kind of still read you read in your own accent.
Yeah,
so
you read in your own accent. And like with Boris, like I do have quite a few friends like Boris who are from that part of the world who did learn English here, who do speak in that way. So I know exactly how Boris is supposed to sound. And the movie kind of just went full Russian with that.
I think, though, as well, like, maybe they didn't want to put
Yeah.
too much on Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
it's a very hard...
It is quite challenging anyway.
Australian accents is really hard. That was the whole reason I didn't want to see The Dressmaker, because I was like, I don't want to see Kate Winslet butcher the Australian accent.
But she was so good. She has a better Australian accent than me.
I was pleasantly surprised that
Dev
she was...
Patel also has a better Australian accent than me.
I don't think so. I don't think his Australian
so.
accent is as good as Kate Winslet's. The worst
It's still better than mine.
The worst Australian accent ever done in a movie, besides those guys in Pacific Rim.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it.
No. They're not that bad compared to Benedict Cumberbatch as Julian Assange. That is like an atrocity of an accent. Like, yeah. I don't even... The only way I justify it to myself is that Julian Assange talks like a weirdo, so it kind of doesn't matter. But anyway, Australian accents are hard, which is why I don't mind that they didn't make Finn Wolfhard do it, because he is only a child. And I think he did a good job anyway.
Yeah, he did a good job with what we were given.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just kind of like the idea of just a montage of Boris standing in different locations, like in the center of the screen, holding an umbrella to block the sun, but like the scenery behind him changes to different countries, just to show that he's lived in all these places. Like, that would be really cute.
That is actually very cute.
Yeah, like Theo just introducing us to Boris in this way with this voiceover, and Boris maybe interrupting his voiceover to fix any mistakes that he happens to make. He said his favorite place to grow up was Indonesia. Papua, you dickhead. Like, that kind of thing. Yeah. I just think that would be really neat.
Pretty shots. Most importantly, part one is we have the boys.
Yes.
Yeah, the boys.
Like, we're reading off like basically just a dot point, and one dot point just says YTB.
Yeah, the boys. Yeah. Shoplifting montage.
Oh my god.
Getting drunk montages. Swimming montages.
I don't know all about swimming.
The pool scene from the movie is actually quite good.
I love the pool scene from the movie.
It's sweet.
Lot. Yeah, I did like the way that they did that, and the way that Theo reveals what happened to him and his mother.
Should make a letterbox list of like movies with like nice pool scenes.
Yeah, that's true. That's the annoying thing about this movie, is there are moments definitely that were done so well. And it's like, because you're imagining the rest of the story the way that you want it to be, you kind of forget that the movie itself is shit. Like, when you're just looking at that scene out of context. And
I love the shots of them jumping in, like the way they are, like, it's at a low angle, like looking up at them, like, and they sort of jump out of the frame. Like, I really love the way that was filmed. But also, I think in part one, you need to also emphasize Theo's PTSD, which I'm sure we would have shown bits and pieces of at the barbers.
Already, yeah.
But, like, it gets really bad in Vegas because obviously he's not coping, really.
He's not coping, really. And when Theo and Boris meet up later in life, like, Boris will recount all these times that Theo just, like, is completely blackout and, like, just wants to walk out into the desert and tells him to leave him there to die, or will just, like, lie in the middle of the road waiting for someone to run him over. I think we should have that.
Yeah.
I think we should also have just, like, their movie nights. Yeah. Them just, like, messing around. I love that scene. I think it's at Thanksgiving or Christmas where, like, they have that fight by the pool where they're drunk and, like, vomiting in the pool and stuff. And then, like, gosh, yes. And then the morning later, like, they look out the window and look at the pool and it looked like someone had been murdered there. Yeah. Like, I love that in the book, which we
because they're bleeding, because isn't that after we see Boris get beat up by his dad? Isn't it after that? And that's why his blood is everywhere. Yeah. Yeah, also I think in this episode it's good to start introducing Theo's dad's money issues, and those can sort of be in the background though, because that's the way they sort of are in the book. Like
during that first year in Vegas, they definitely are. Also, Popper, the dog.
Popchick,
he's such a good boy.
You know what I'm sad? They didn't have scenes in the movie where Boris just puts Popchick on Theo, like when he's having panic attacks. Yeah, he just plumps Popchick on there and.
Yeah, to help him calm down. Like, we're given just that one scene where he wakes up from a nightmare and Boris, like, holds him until he calms down. But that's it, really. Thought it would be a pretty neat idea that, like, throughout the whole episode you see them wearing each other's clothes at different points. Because that is how they were in the book. Also,
they do that in the movie as well.
Yeah. A little bit.
As much as they can. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think it'd be cool to end this episode with a more specific introduction to that dude that keeps coming around looking for Theo's dad.
Mr. Silver.
Mr. Silver. I liked him as a villain.
Yeah.
He was, like, perfectly
quite
creepy.
Scary. Also, just in general, the thing about this portion of the book, this first year in Vegas, is Theo does talk very briefly about the fact that he and Boris are basically...
They're doing, like, sexual things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While drunk, but, like, things that he does remember doing and things that they won't talk about. Things that Theo definitely feels ashamed about but won't even admit to that shame. And I think that's ultimately, like, why this is such a popular book with gay people our age. Because it is quite relatable, like, having those kinds of relationships where you don't even want to talk about
and also,
what's
like,
happening.
Sort of gaslighting yourself and being like,
Mhm.
oh, it's not even a thing. It's not even...
And just feeling so alone as well. This particularly resonates with me now that I'm, like, nearly 23. I've actually learned in the past few months that there were several friends who I had known at that age who were also gay like me, and we just never talked about it, and we would never say anything. And, like, I always think about how sad it is that we never, like, we could have supported each other back then. We could have made each other safe. But the reality is it's so internalized in you to be so scared and, like, to isolate yourself.
Yeah. You're just never taught to seek out community like that. You're never taught to do it.
You're taught that it doesn't exist.
Because you're never taught it.
It is a problem.
Mm.
Like, kids these days in schools, like here in Australia especially, you know how they've tried to campaign, like,
For the Safe Schools
initiative, where basically children are taught, hey, it is possible that you may be gay, you may be trans, and that's okay. But a lot of people have been trying to get that actually...
Some schools have implemented it anyway. Like, I know there are quite a few primary schools who have done it anyway.
That's good.
Which is really great. Because it's not actually, like, illegal to put it in your schools. Yeah. It's just that old bill was about, like, making it, like, law to put it in schools. But there was nothing saying that you couldn't put it in your school anyway. So there have been, like, quite a few schools I've read about who have just done it anyway, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's good. But there have been many pushbacks about that law because people are just like, no, I don't actually want my child to know about this and to feel like it is okay to be this because it's not okay.
Australia also has a really messed up law that is also in other countries, but there is also a law here that basically means that private schools specifically, and there are, I think in some states, also public schools, have the right to actually turn away a student if they are LGBT. Like, that's very much a thing. In New South Wales, it's a thing. In Queensland, it's a thing.
And also teachers as well, right?
And teachers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is... Yeah, it's very disturbing. And basically they're trying at the moment to get a federal law put in place that would make that nationwide. Because that was the guarantee, that was the deal that Malcolm Turnbull sort of proposed in order to push...
Our previous Prime Minister.
Our previous Prime Minister proposed to get through the marriage plebiscite. Which
Equality Act,
Yeah, which is basically like, yeah, we'll give the gays marriage, but like...
religious freedom.
But only on the condition that schools have the religious freedom to deny LGBT kids education and LGBT teachers jobs.
Which is awful.
Hellscape. Anyway, that's a bit of a divergence, but
that is why the story is important to people, because it is very much about that experience of being so isolated from it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
from your own identity,
and wanting to deny it as a result, because you don't feel connected to it. You don't want to feel connected to it, so you just repress it. And Donna Tartt, as you've repeatedly said, is all about that repression. So then episode 4, we have Vegas Part 2.
My first dot point just says Kotku writes. I love Kotku.
Kotku is Boris's girlfriend.
Yeah, Boris gets a girlfriend.
Now this is a very interesting sequence because Theo is very jealous, but he doesn't really realize that that's what he's feeling. He just...
like, even Theo in hindsight is kind of just being like, nah.
Yeah. Nah, that was just a perfectly normal thing to feel.
I was just lonely. Yeah.
Which is also true.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's easy for him to write off.
But he wasn't just lonely.
Yeah.
And then we get more focus on his dad. Like, we do have Theo, like, actually hanging out with his dad more often because he doesn't have Boris so often anymore.
And because his dad is on a bit of a winning streak for a while until he isn't. And we get that horrible sequence where he's, like, forcing Theo to ring up the lawyers and try and get his inheritance. Also, like, he basically lies to Theo about setting up a trust fund just to hide money.
Yeah,
like,
just so that he could get his social security number. One thing about the book, because it's set over 2 years, there is a Thanksgiving scene in both. There are 2 Thanksgiving scenes and there are 2 Christmas scenes. 2 Christmas scenes? Or at least there's definitely 2
There's 2 Thanksgivings. I don't know about Christmas.
Yeah, and I would like, basically, for episode 3 to have had the Thanksgiving and Christmas scene, and then when episode 4 does it again, it shows the actual contrast. It actually shows, like, the time that has passed and how Theo and Boris have changed as people throughout that time, and just, like, I guess the tenseness of it all. Also, throughout this episode, I think we should actually bring out the painting and have a look at it. And
because Theo does get very obsessive in this part of looking at the painting. He looks at it quite a lot.
Yeah, because it's all he's got. And there is a really nice quote from the book. I don't remember it exactly, but he talks about how people in the museum could only see the painting in one way, but he was able to see it all year round in all different kinds of lights and all different kinds of mood. And I don't know, I really imagine if a screen adaptation would do a beautiful kind of time lapse type of thing, where we just saw the painting in all those beautiful lights. Fun fact, the movie painting was actually just a 3D printing
of the Goldfinch.
Yeah,
cool.
That was cool.
That's crazy. Art forgers are going to be out of a job if people can just 3D print. That's what famous artworks.
Yeah, but that's what art forgers can do then.
Yeah, but then there's no talent to it.
But also, it's made of plastic. I think art forgers will still have jobs. Because the whole point is it's not supposed to be plastic, it's supposed to be
if nothing else on this podcast, we have decided that art forgers will not be unemployed.
Yeah.
Such a sexy idea for an occupation. I love it. Yes, but of course this episode is gonna have to come to an end. Theo and Boris getting real high and finding out that Theo's dad has died. Essentially committed suicide. I don't know how you could have gone out driving with a blood alcohol level of 3.9 with any other intention other than killing yourself.
Yeah.
And Theo, of course, because he's high and very scared and very lonely.
And he's scared that he'll be put into foster care, that kind of thing. He has to leave immediately and he wants to do it that very night. And I guess this is the emotional climax of the story because Theo is literally so scared and desperate and, obviously not really thinking clearly, but he really wants Boris to come with him. And he takes Papa because he's scared that Papa isn't going to be looked after properly.
My wholesome boy.
We get
the kiss.
We do get the kiss. I'm really pissed off at the way the movie handled this. I do need to say this.
Okay.
I feel when I went into the cinema, I was okay, this is a bad movie, but I'll mostly enjoy it. But this scene really was just the turning point for me where I was nah, fuck this movie. Because probably another really bad thing that the movie does is the scenes kind of mush into each other because they're cutting corners because it's such a long story that they have the audio for one sequence will start before the scene has even ended, and then it will cut through. It's all merged together. You're actually not even given.
I actually think this movie was very poorly edited. It might have been beautifully shot and it was beautifully acted, but in terms of editing, it was done so shite. It was. It really felt like it was put together by someone who makes fan videos, not someone who edits movies. Sorry, keep going.
And by doing this kind of editing, you're not actually given the time to really dwell and process what's actually happened, and you're kind of just moved on to the next thing. And that's just so against what this story is about, because it's all about dwelling on the past and the things that have happened to you. It's all about all the little things that have led you to where you are in your life, and those things that you've never been able to let go of no matter how hard you try. And the thing about Thea's departure, the thing about the kiss scene that I really hated was the way that, Theo is begging Boris to come with him, and literally this really upbeat song starts playing in the middle of this really tense conversation.
It's such a weird song.
It's really weird, ruins the tone completely because it makes it almost comical, and even when Boris kisses him, it's almost we thought we were safe because the kiss scene was in the trailer. We thought they would, at least they're not going to straightwash it, but no, they ruined it that way by adding in that song.
They really
and kind of
undermine it.
They play out the scene, the Vegas section, that way, which is really awful. And the thing that really made me decide fuck this movie was in the cinema where I watched it, people actually laughed when Boris kissed Theo.
They didn't.
And that just made me feel so hurt.
You're not meant
because
to laugh.
having
Oh
guess,
my gosh. Sorry, that's
I don't
just
know
made
if
me
it-
upset.
Yeah, it probably was, like, very well could have been just homophobic audiences in the theatre who weren't expecting that. And, you know, like, that's probably the worst thing when you are watching a gay movie in cinemas, when there are homophobic audiences reacting to it and ruining it for people. But really, like, even without those people that laughed, I think I would have hated it anyway. Yeah, that was awful. And basically, and the same song continues, just like a very quick montage of him in the bus traveling across the country back to New York, and literally the same song is still playing when he shows up at Hobie's doorstep. Like, you're not actually even given the time to process, like, the gravity of that situation of Theo losing, like, the
Theo
only
is now
person
an-
that he had.
Theo is, now an
Theo
orphan.
is now an orphan.
Like, for all intents and purposes, his father was a shithead, and no one's denying that, but that was still his dad.
Yeah.
That was still a member of his family.
Yeah.
It's also emphasized in the book, something that the movie didn't bother to emphasize, that Theo doesn't have family that want to take him in. Like, his grandparents...
Oh, yeah, his grandparents weren't able to take care of him.
Yep. Because they're sick, and that's, that's a whole other thing. But, yeah, the movie doesn't bother to, like, emphasize that. Like, I actually probably think that people who watched the movie wondered, like, why doesn't this kid live with a other relative? Like, because they never at any point emphasize that he doesn't have anybody else. Like, that's the whole reason why he goes to the barbers. Because they're like, oh, we can't actually get in touch with any of your family members. And he's like, oh, okay.
Like, at that point, he hadn't even spoken with Andy for years. He's literally, like, grasping at straws because he doesn't actually have anyone that he's that close to. It's just a stroke of luck that Andy and the barbers were. It's really nice that they were actually able to take him in, even though he'd been so disconnected from them for so long.
Yeah. But they do, because I don't think the Barbers are actually, like, bad people. Like, not Mrs. Barber and Mr. Barber, anyway. Kitsy, I don't know about her, but, like, that's okay, I guess. Andy's my boy. But, yeah, so I think it's important to make sure that's emphasized, because otherwise when it gets to this point where he's like, well, I've got no one now. And that's what also makes that line so devastating, when he's like, I've got no friends. And, like...
He's like, I have no one. And
I have no one.
just
and
looks
Boris
at him
just goes like, oh, they've got to emphasize that. So when the separation happens, it's appropriately devastating. Which brings us to episode 5. Here's where we get to my personal favorite episode, I think.
Really? Okay, cool.
I like this because I actually love the sequence in the book where Theo is making his way back to New York.
I do love
from
it.
Vegas.
And he's trying to hide Papa and
Yeah.
stuff.
There's actually, like, a lot of random people who are just very nice to Theo in this sequence, like the cab driver who helps him, the bus driver who's like, yeah, look, I know I'm not allowed to have dogs on this bus,
but I have to take him off if anyone complains. And like, no one complains.
No one complains. I love a road trip sequence, even if it's sad. Like, road trip sequences are good. Also, like, it's a very sad sequence. It makes you dwell, We keep saying how this is all about dwelling. This part, the journey back to New York.
Oh, yeah, we forgot which was, of course, I love you.
Oh, yeah.
Once Theo was in the cab, going away, like, never seeing Boris again, Theo actually says that he loves Boris.
He admits that to himself, which is...
That he should have said it. Well, he says, he's like, I'm glad I didn't actually say it out loud. Which is also another thing that's quite sad. Yeah.
All part of that internalized homophobia. And then, of course, there's so much relief when Theo gets back to New York and he finds Hobie. He is homeless for a little while, though, isn't he? Doesn't he wander around the streets for a while?
For like a day.
Oh, I also, this is not funny, but it kind of is. I kind of thought it was funny reading how Papa is, like, so, like, can't handle the city at all because he's so used to Vegas, which is, like, empty. When he gets to New York, he just keeps, like, shitting himself because he can't handle the city, which I think is a good...
Yeah.
It's an interesting little analogy for, like, Theo's mindset, because he realizes he can't handle it anymore either, and but when he gets back to Hobie, this is the good shit. This is the good stuff.
I love it. Hobie is just such a, like, what a wonderful human being. Just real human being, real hero.
Yeah.
I love Hobie.
And
the thing is, Hobie, like, another thing is Hobie is quite sad as well, because he's lost Welty.
There's, like, an implication that Hobie is gay as well.
Yeah, so we have Theo back with Hobie. We have Theo actually going to the storage locker and hiding the painting because he's so paranoid. Like, there are all those news reports about other thieves from that same day being caught
Yes, because he sees in the newspaper that a whole bunch of people who stole art from the museum during the explosion are getting arrested. So naturally, because Theo is a child and also in possession of a stolen painting, he gets really paranoid and hides it in the storage facility.
It's
then
completely wrapped up.
That's important.
That is important.
That is important that it's completely wrapped up.
He duct tapes it, doesn't he?
Yeah, he duct tapes it
newspaper
in
and
Vegas.
stuff.
He duct tapes it before he goes, and it's completely bubble wrapped. He doesn't open and look at it after Vegas.
Damn, I wonder if that's gonna come back to haunt him later. I don't know.
Who knows? Could even have like a line of narration where he's like, I couldn't even look at it. I didn't even want to look at it. And you're like, well, maybe you should have. But then after he goes to the storage shed, then we have that phone call
with Xandra.
This is like an very big emotional beat in this episode. Like the phone call between Xandra and Theo, because Hobie insists that Theo call Xandra and tell him where he is. And Theo just knows that Xandra doesn't give a shit about him. Yeah. And
he's stolen back like his mom's earrings from her as well.
Yeah. Oh yes, and he's also stolen Xandra's drugs and money.
And they have that one last phone call and she's just like, where the fuck are you, little shit? And where's my dog? What'd you do? And she's just like, you and that Boris, like he's probably gonna end up in jail.
Yeah. And he basically says, like, you and your mother, like, both deserve to be dead. She says something horrible like that.
Yeah, and she says, like, you are actually, like, so much like your father than you think, even though you hate him. And, I just really like the idea of Theo having that phone call with Xandra, and you only really hear Xandra's voice just, like attacking him through the phone, and then she's just like, you're just like your father.
You're just like your father.
I don't know why we've given Xandra a Boston accent, but...
Boston. It's because we were watching
Because we were just referencing...
Treasure.
No, it's because I was referencing that Vine with the duck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of just like, you're just like... And then Theo just, like, hangs up on her. And then we immediately cut to adult Theo.
Yes. Adult Theo, who is not played by Ansel Elgort.
No.
Very important.
And then we have our scamming montage.
Yeah.
So you know how Theo runs that. I actually really love kind of like the way that the tone completely shifts, and Theo is explaining the way that he scams. Theo, who is now like a partner in Hobart and Blackwell's antique business, has been scamming rich people into purchasing the changelings.
Yeah, like Frankenstein-ish, like pieced together from bits and pieces, furniture.
That Hobie has been making.
Yeah, it's a scam that works for a good long while, and the reason he does this, and this is important to emphasize, is because Hobart and Blackwell, the business, is very deeply in debt, and Hobie is not.
Hobie is, like, also quite sad still about Welty, and, like, he's not really able to carry on.
No.
He's being, like, basically swindled by his friends. People frequently, like, actually steal from the shop. I love that moment in the book where young Theo comes upstairs, like, into the shop, and he sees, like, this woman just, like, putting a paperweight or something into her handbag, and he sees it, and he's just like, that's $600. But even though it's worth so much less, and, like, she pays for it anyway. I
know.
Yeah. I just love the idea of, who doesn't love rich people getting scammed? Like, other than rich people. Fuck them.
The whole idea of the scam montage is that it's very fast.
Yeah.
And we want to give the impression like Theo is high, but obviously like the viewer might not know that at first because he's just really excited and like, wow, I'm going to do this and this and this, and that's how I scam these people. But then it's going to sort of slow down and you realize like, oh, and then he goes, whoop. In his narration, you see him taking drugs.
Yeah.
And you realize, like, the reason why the scamming montage is like that is because he's high a lot of the time. And I think the saddest part about this is, like, when he talks about how he basically kept taking Xandra's drugs that he stole.
Yeah.
And he took them at such a rate that he ran out of them very fast.
Yeah.
And built up such a tolerance that he takes, like, really hardcore stuff, like, just to get through the day. And it's really interesting the way he just lies to himself, like, oh, yeah, I'm not really addicted, like, I only take, like, you know, these 3 pills, and I swim twice a week, and all this stuff, and you're like, oh, dear, bro, Oh no, don't do drugs, kids. Bad for you.
Yeah.
Also, in this sequence, somewhere along these lines, is we reintroduce the Theo and Pippa connection.
Yeah.
Because he's, at this point in the book, he's very obsessed with her.
So we brought this up a little bit earlier, but I think we should go into it. I love the way that Theo and Pippa's dynamic is written in the story. I love how, I think it is very important, and I've noticed a lot with other Goldfinch fans, they kind of just want to focus on, Theo and Boris. But I think even though Theo's obsession with Pippa, I think, is very integral to the story and his relationship with Pippa, because they are both survivors of the same incidents, and with Pippa we are able to see how she is coping with everything that she lost that day as well, and we are able to see how she's dealing with it in a much more healthier way than Theo is, who is not dealing with it at all.
The comparison that he does between himself and her it's heartbreaking.
It is quite sad.
But Theo is sort of in love with this idea of her that he's got in his head.
I think Theo is convinced that he is in love with Pippa. He's kind of obsessed with her. And I feel like it's a really good examination of compulsory heterosexuality, where basically he's so convinced that Pippa is the one because she is so symbolic. She was there the same day. They are bound that way. They wouldn't even, because she understands him. That's why he's put her up on this pedestal. It is really sad the way he treats her, but also I love Pippa herself because she is just so honest about it, and she knows full well why she and Theo can't work.
The End of the Effing World on Netflix deals with that concept quite well in its second season. There's this lovely scene, the two main characters are on a sort of...
I don't know a single
You don't know
thing
a single thing about it? Okay, well, the End of the Effing World, they're they've gone through this traumatic shit, these two teenagers. They killed a man. They actually killed Anderson from Sherlock. Good for them, right? They murder him.
You said the S word.
I'm sorry. But they kill him because he's a psycho that's been murdering college students, and they kill him, and it's very traumatic though for both of them, and they're so traumatized they can't really handle being each other's friend. But there's this lovely moment at the end of season 2 where he's one of them says to the other, I can't remember, they're oh, I'm sorry, I tried to make you the answer to what was happening to me, I should have sought psychological help. And it was funny, when I was watching it, I thought that's essentially what Theo tries to do with
except
Pippa.
He doesn't really apologize to Pippa.
No, he doesn't. But that whole idea of oh, I have all these issues, and if I focus them all on this one person, if I can be oh, loving this person will fix all of that.
Yeah.
Which is not true. That's just not true. If you've been through a traumatic event, if you are have a mental, that's just not true. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And I think, it would have been nice if maybe Theo had apologized to Pippa in some capacity for doing that, but I feel that's what he's doing. He's trying to make Pippa into this answer of well, I've gone through this horrible thing with this person, and that's why this person is the answer, because they're the only person that gets this.
Yeah.
So they're the only person that can fix this, when really, poor Pippa has stuff of her own to deal with. So, but we're going to just reintroduce him thinking of Pippa and how she's actually in England with her boyfriend.
She's living her best life, really.
Living her best life. She's actually doing quite well for herself relative to Theo, but then again, everyone's doing all right.
Everyone's doing better than Theo is.
And then I think, the way I want this episode to end is with probably, one of the main other villains. And I like this parallel because the way we sort of start the adult sequences, you're just like your father. And then the way we end this is with Lucius Reeve coming to Theo and being you can't swindle me, son, which is essentially
very Mr. Silver-esque.
Yeah, very Mr. Silver-esque, to show that Theo is fallen into these unhealthy coping things that his father did as well, and is now suffering a similar fate to his father, which I like. I like that little parallel. But Lucius Reeve also, I love the descriptions of him in the book.
Yeah.
If we ever actually got to do this, it'd be so fun to cast him. It'd be so fun to cast
They cast such a boring dude in the movie.
I know! He wasn't even sufficiently, creepy or someone really seedy and...
Tommy Wiseau.
Tommy Wiseau. Yes. No, actually, he's too funny. I think he carries too much, like, thing where people just can't be like...
Yeah.
People can't not be like, that's Tommy Wiseau, you know?
I know.
But yes, I think this should end, though, with Lucius Reeve
being like, I know you have the painting.
I know you have the painting.
And Theo being like, what?
What? I've never heard of it. The painting. I don't even know an art.
And yeah, him just like laughing out of the restaurant.
And then that is the end of episode 5. Then we get to episode... Oh,
episode 5 should actually end with, we don't see their face, but we see someone stepping into Hobart and Blackwell while the shop is empty.
Yes. Who could it be?
I don't know. Who could it be?
And then episode 6, we open probably on Theo still freaking out about Lucius Reeve. When who should he run into? But Platt, who is Andy's older brother, so Platt Barber. And he drops the most devastating bomb of this whole book.
I know, it was really like, oh damn.
I was like...
Of the whole book though?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love Andy.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? For me.
He drops the bombshell that Andy is dead.
Yeah. And he, not only that, but he died doing something he hated.
He drowned while sailing with his father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you will find out a lot about the Barbers in this sequence as well. You find out that the dad had bipolar, I think it was, and he wasn't treating himself, which led to them being very worried for him, which is why someone had to go with him sailing, because he would get really like manic when he was sailing, and poor Andy went along, and they both just got hit by a wave or something, didn't they? And they weren't wearing life vests. It's pretty tragic, pretty horrible. But episode 6 is essentially revolving around Theo being reunited with the Barbers after all this time. So we have dinner with the Barbers, and also...
I love Theo reuniting with Mrs. Barber. Like, that's so lovely.
I actually legitimately felt emotion in the movie when she was like...
That's just the power of Nicole Kidman.
I hope you know I always thought of you as one of my boys. I was like, oh... Yeah, anyway. But, the power of Nicole Kidman. So, yeah, lots of Mrs. Barber and Theo, but of course we introduce another very just emotionally draining plotline of this book where Theo just enters into an engagement with...
Into a relationship
with Kitsy, who is the youngest girl of the Barbers. The only girl. Oh, that's right, yeah, only girl, who is Andy's older sister? Younger sister. Honestly, reading this, I was like, what?
Yeah.
What?
And it happens so fast.
It happens so fast.
In the novel as well, like it just like skips ahead.
It's like, another example, I think, of like I'd argue more than Pippa.
Yes.
Because
definitely.
Theo just sort of goes, oh yeah, well this just makes sense because she's Andy's little sister. Yeah, it makes so much
sense, and like, you know, like he also feels like that obligation because the Barbers have like fallen on hard times, and he's like, obviously Mrs. Barber, like her health is like completely depleted, like her mental state is totally different, like she is not the strong woman that we saw in the first act. And like, so like he feels like he owes it to Mrs. Barber in the same way that also Kitsy feels like she owes it to her mom, you know, because Theo is someone that Mrs. Barber likes so much.
She loved him.
Yeah, because Theo like did look out for Andy while they were children.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have some Boris foreshadowing as well. When Theo talks to guys who help him move stuff in the shop, they'll be like, oh, someone dropped by the shop. We saw someone hanging around the shop.
Mm-hmm. And he'll think it's Lucius Reeve.
Yes.
But it isn't. Because
remember at this point we have Lucius Reeve sort of looming over Theo. And because of Lucius Reeve looming over Theo, and because he believes Lucius Reeve is now stopping by the shop, he also, in this episode, confesses to Hobie about the scam that he's been running. Honestly, I have secondhand embarrassment when I read those scenes. I was like, you really just scammed this, like, and then you're just thinking that, oh, I'm just gonna tell him and it'll be all right. Like, no, it's not.
You fucked up, Theo. You fucked up.
Oh. And then, of course, we drop another little bombshell because at this point, you know, we've seen Kitsy and Theo montaging of going to parties. They're obviously, you know, going to get engaged, or they have gotten engaged. And then we drop the bomb that
they're doing drugs in the bathroom all the meantime.
Yeah. He's not happy.
No. But him pretending that it's all right. Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
This episode is the equivalent of that picture of that dog with the house on fire, and he's like, this is fine. Like, this is what this episode is.
I'm pretty sure the remaining episodes are going to be like that.
But Kitsy is unfaithful.
Yes.
This is what we realize, and she's been having an affair with, what's his name? Tom Cable, who was actually the person that got Theo in trouble in the very beginning of this story.
Yeah, that got Theo suspended from school, which led them to having to
meet the principal on the weekend, which is why he and his mother were in the museum, which is why they got blown up. So Tom Cable is a very interesting focal point of Theo's guilt, and he's
kind of in the peripheries of the story each time, just as this omen. I don't know.
Yeah, he really is though. But that is
Damn it, Cable.
But that is not where this episode ends. This episode ends with Theo discovering that Kitsy is unfaithful, and then he's out on the street going, I'm gonna go get some drugs, and then he hears
Potter.
Which I don't think we've actually explained. That's Boris's nickname.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's Boris's nickname for Theo because he wears really round glasses.
Yeah.
And then we are in episode 7. Obviously, we'll have another vignette, as we have at the start, though we haven't always mentioned it. There's always going to be a vignette of where the painting has been
has survived.
Episode 7 opens on Boris and Theo reunion and all the chaos that ensues as a result of the reunion.
Basically, they just have a really wild night out, and they fall very much back into old ways.
Yep, lots of drugs, lots of alcohol.
Of Boris just, ranting like crazy. I didn't mention this before, but Boris goes on rants about so many specific random things. Even in the Vegas act, he has the whole climate change rant and things. I love that about him.
It kind of reminded me, in Preacher, how Cassidy goes on very specific rants about very specific things, namely the Big Lebowski, but other things as well.
Yeah.
Conspiracies and stuff that he knows. I just like that. I like when characters are I have this very specific opinion and y'all are going to hear about it.
Yeah. Something really funny that happens throughout this sequence is Boris is almost certain that Theo was really mad at him for something.
Yes.
Boris is almost certain that Theo wants to murder him, and Theo, who is just drunk out of his mind, is trying to lead him back to Hobart and Blackwell, being come on here, and Boris is really suspicious. He's just Boris, I don't know about this. Can I take my security guard, my driver watching? He really thought that Theo was gonna
do something,
murder him.
Yep, and then
in New York City on a weeknight.
But then who is it? Who is he just taking Boris to see?
Really, it's just Theo being hey, look at our dog! He's still alive!
Popchick is still here! And I love that Popchick is he's an old boy now, but he still loves.
He's supposed to be deaf at this point, deaf and mostly blind at this point.
Love him.
Yeah.
Love that boy. Good boy. And it is after this sequence.
We have the scene in the car.
Yep.
Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not in the car, but I do like the idea of it being in a car in the movie. But the movie just didn't do it well enough.
And we reveal why Boris has been acting so strangely, why he is so paranoid that Theo wants to hurt him or is angry at him, and the reason for this is...
Boris stole the painting from Theo back in Vegas.
And Theo doesn't realise this, and it's really funny in a horrible way.
I know.
Because, Theo is
what are you talking about?
What are you talking about? What? No, I have
Boris
the painting.
is just I'm so fucking sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. He's what are you talking about? He's no, I'm so sorry. I can't believe. Don't make me say it. It goes on for a few pages of Boris apologizing and not wanting to say what he's apologizing for.
Boris does that thing that all men do where they're when they're asked a question, they just tell you a real long story, and it's but you haven't actually said anything. And he just tells this story oh yeah, and when we were in Vegas and we were doing this and this and this and you were really drunk, blah blah, and Theo's
and also you were the only boy I've ever been with.
Yep.
Oops.
Whoops.
But
more importantly, I took the painting, and the thing that you have, whatever you think you have, is not the painting. So then Theo gets really angry. He jumps out of the car, basically. He's no! And he goes to the storage locker to see if this is true, because he still believes, no, Boris can't be telling the truth. I have the painting.
Also, Boris has been using the painting, as collateral for drug deals. defends it. Yeah. Anyway.
And of course he unwraps the package that he has been diligently and paranoidly guarding.
Yeah, he's been paying for that storage locker for how many years? Oh my god, that would be so expensive.
His paranoia for that painting dictate so much of his life, only to find that he does not actually have it. And what has been sitting in that bubble wrap sticky tape package is
just a school textbook.
It's truly a devastating moment when you read it.
It honestly is.
You just realize everything in Theo's life. Yeah. Once again, everything has been pulled out from under him. And also at this point, it's also good to remember Theo is still dealing with Lucius Reeve. He's still dealing with Kitsy. He got a lot going on.
Yeah. It's he doesn't even have this one thing.
Nope.
That anchors him to his mother even.
Yep. But there's also that thing of the painting being kind of Theo's soul. And then Boris had it this whole time.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. Wow.
The movie didn't even show the painting all that much.
No. And it's not it's a made-up painting. It's a real painting.
It's a real painting.
Yeah.
It didn't showcase... it doesn't even, really bring in, why Theo even cares about the painting until maybe the last act. But it doesn't even explain that well enough. Everything about the movie is bad.
So after this, after he realizes that it's not in the storage locker, and there's a bit of sulking for a while where Boris is doing stuff and Theo's doing stuff, he tries to distract himself with stuff about Kitsy.
There is that really sad confrontation with Kitsy where he does confront her about cheating.
And Kitsy is very blasé about it. She's like, "Oh, darling, we'll just get married anyway. We make sense, you know, just deal with it, you know." Trauma on top of trauma for poor Theo. But he just sort of agrees with it because he's like, well, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
He has dug himself this hole.
But we see him and Boris, after a little while, start to investigate where the painting could be. Because Boris has obviously lost the painting now. So he's trying to find it to give it back to Theo. And we see him meet up with that seedy art guy. Horst. That's why Theo is running late for a lot of engagement things. So that could be a cool montage.
We keep saying montage.
I like a montage. Okay. I like a montage. But of course, I think this episode should have a very large segment exploring
about Pippa.
Yeah, exploring that relationship between Theo and Pippa. Because, this is what happens in the book as well. Yeah. He goes on Pippa happens to come back from London. She's coming... She's flying to Montreal or something. And she stops by to see Hobie and to see Theo.
And also, Theo's engagement party is tomorrow.
And Theo decides to take her out on a date. And it really is a date because when you read it, it reads like a date. He's getting ready for it like a date. He's nervous like it's a date. It's quite sad. This is what is happening a few days before his engagement party. They go and see a documentary and then they have...
which he thinks Pippa will really like, but actually it's really triggering for her, about a musician that she was a fan of.
It's very upsetting. And they have a very important conversation after the movie about why they can't be together, essentially, which Theo does need to hear.
Theo doesn't even really say anything, but it's just Pippa has the chance to let it all out, and we get to see how Pippa has been struggling too. It has been so hard for her as well, but she's not doing all the shit that Theo's been doing.
She really sort of drives home for him.
She's actually putting in the work to get better.
And I don't know, this is also sad in a way though, because I think Theo is sort of relying on Pippa in this scene to be his one last thing that he can rely on, you know.
He doesn't even have the painting anymore.
No, he doesn't have the painting. He feels like he doesn't even have Boris really because he can't trust Boris.
He doesn't have his engagement, really.
Lucius Reeve is hanging around, and it means he feels like he's disconnected from Hobie.
Pissed.
Yeah, so we leave Theo on this note in episode 7 of Pippa telling him it's never gonna happen, dude. You're gonna have to just accept that we're just gonna be friends. We're just bound by this event, and that will always be a foundation for our friendship. But that's all it's ever gonna be. And we leave Theo on this very dejected and very hopeless note in episode 7 to proceed to episode 8, which I'm very happy to just have the engagement party because that sequence is so long.
on.
And I want you, like, in the sort of the way we make the explosion, like, I want you to really feel how grueling this engagement party
and tiring it is.
Yeah, it
and
is.
Just like the repetitive questions, the niceties, the plan, and just everything. I love that about the scene. Something we discussed that we would like to see in this miniseries were shots which are like direct references or recreations of certain paintings, especially those discussed in the book, like by the Dutch masters, kind of like what the film Frida did, but more subtle. I had a specific idea for this engagement party episode. I would love it to be the anatomy lesson by Rembrandt, where Theo is the cadaver, obviously, and all the guests are the doctors. Maybe he could trip and fall back on a table or something. I haven't worked it all out, but that's very much how Theo feels at this party, and that's how we'd like to represent it. Also, something really cute, I don't know if it's cute, that happens in the book is that Francis Abernathy is actually present, one of the guests at the engagement party, and he is a character from The Secret History who is gay, who was also suffering from substance issues. This story.
This is just the party for all the gays who can't cope.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had to think, like, it's really just like he just introduces himself and that's it, but I don't know.
I can't really comment because I haven't read The Secret History, so I can't really speak to the reference, but I love the engagement scene.
And all the other guests that are invited, like apparently, like Prince Albert of Monaco was invited. I don't know if he showed up.
Who the hell are the Barbers?
I know.
They know all these people.
Yeah.
Like, I get they're rich, but how?
Her crazy godmother, like, organized it. It needs to be a disgusting display of wealth.
Mm-hmm. Yup. Disgusting displays of wealth. But also some nice interactions. Like, you know that phrase, like, some people are like islands? Like, I want you to really feel like when Theo talks to, like, the people that he cares about in this scene. Like,
he gets to talk to Hobie and Pippa in this scene, it's like he's,
the sigh of relief, like, and Mrs. Barbara as well, like, the sigh of, the feeling of relief you get in those moments where he's talking to them and not talking to Pippa or talking to anyone else.
Yeah.
But, of course, the engagement party is disrupted.
Oh, yeah.
It's crashed.
By your boy.
Boris.
Yeah.
Who comes in and is like, Theo, what are you doing? Like, why are you here? We gotta go.
We gotta go to Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm. And then Theo basically goes, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Ditches the party, ditches everything. Also, there's kind of cute scene with Boris and is it Pippa? He's just chilling with Pippa, and he's like, "Oh, she's really cool."
I know. Yeah, not enough of these characters really interacted with each other in the movie, which upset me a lot. I was like, you don't even have Hobie meeting Boris, and you don't even have Mrs. Barber interacting with anyone else in Theo's life, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, I think it's very important that we end this episode with Theo and Boris running off to Amsterdam because they have found a lead on where the painting is.
Yes.
Which brings us to our grand finale, which starts with a vignette like all the others, except this is the actual explosion at the museum and Theo taking it.
Yeah.
So it's all coming together now.
Yeah.
You know?
I remember you asking about this, how does Theo even steal the painting? It's so, unrealistic, isn't it that? And I was like, super easy, barely an inconvenience, because Donna Tartt specifically chose that painting because, one, she wanted something that a child would like, two, she wanted something that was small enough for a child to steal inconspicuously.
Which, I didn't realise till much late in the book because I thought it was just stupid. I was like, how has nobody noticed this stupid painting? Anyway, of course, this is it. This is it, kids. Amsterdam, which is going to basically unfold how it does in the book. So
yeah, Amsterdam happens very fast.
It happens very fast. So Theo and Boris get
you're so used to this novel flowing at such a glacial pace that it's really you get through this, you devour this section basically. And you don't even understand what's going on because Theo doesn't quite understand because everything's moving very fast and everything's being orchestrated by Boris, who is also lying to Theo at the same time. And
it's just for show.
Yeah, I love that scene in the book where Theo walks out after dressing up as the rich American businessman. And Boris is just like preparing like a gun, like to use. And he's like, Boris, what the motherfucker? And Boris is like, it's just for show. What? Like a liar.
What?
Like a liar. He's just like, what? I'm not gonna use this. This is empty. This bitch empty.
Yeah, yeet. Pretty much keep this sequence as is. So
yeah.
Boris and Theo go and get the painting, then they lose the painting again, I think.
Theo fucking kills someone.
Yeah, he kills someone. He doesn't handle this very well, and this is where we see him starting, like, in more of the state that we saw him in the prologue from the first.
Yeah, and then we return to him in the hotel room.
Yep, which is where he actually attempts suicide, because he hasn't heard from Boris, because Boris has gone to...
And he thinks that he's, like, totally lost the painting forever.
Yep, because Boris has his passport,
Mm-hmm.
so he's like, I can't get home without a passport, I can't go to the cops, because he has to go to the cops to report his passport missing,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't want to do that, because obviously he's killed a man, and...
he doesn't even know if anyone's chasing him.
Yep, so...
There's that paranoia. He's, like, writing letters for all the people that he cares about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, suicide notes. He basically is just held up in the room doing heaps of heroin and drinking. So he's basically killing himself anyway. And then he goes to actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
But Boris comes and stops him.
Yeah. Boris shows up and he's just like, guess what? I just solved every single problem that you have in your life by accident. The cruel irony of this story. Really? I love the quote in the book. Hang on, let me find it. Like, the quote is about, like, how there's just this relentless irony over divine providence. And Boris is basically, there's, the great scene where Theo has just ordered a bunch of food for himself because it's Christmas, and he's just like, fuck it, I need to eat. And Boris is like, you have just been, like, living it up in here while I have been, like, getting shit done.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to let me in, or shall we just stand here tenderly and gaze?
Oh,
that's my favorite. That's my favorite.
Oh my god.
And
Donna Tartt is such a homophobe, I swear to God.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is. She is. Oh my god. Her and her friggin' Roman numeral chapters just... Yes. And Boris reveals that he actually did what Theo suggested way back when, which was to just hand the painting over to the authorities anonymously and collect the reward for finding the paintings.
And no, by doing so, they happened to find a bunch of other paintings and, like, other pieces of art that were stolen. And so they collect, like, a huge amount of reward money for it.
Massive.
It solves all of Theo's financial problems.
Which he doesn't deserve, in my opinion. Like, I'm sorry. I know Theo is mentally ill. He has a lot of issues. I understand.
No.
But he does not deserve to have his problems resolved that quickly. Like, he was scamming. He was scamming. He wasn't thinking of others. Like, I just... in a way, Ansel Elgort does deserve to be this character because I dislike Ansel Elgort. And he plays Theo well in the sense that I do dislike adult Theo. I feel for him, I do, but at the same time, some of that feeling is hatred.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just don't believe because he basically comes home and when Hobie's upset, rightfully so, because Lucius Reeve has been coming around and Theo vanished to Amsterdam, there's like, it's all good, Hobie. I've got like $1 million now. Like, it's fine. Chill out. And then Donna Tartt, because she hates me, just goes on this big old long, like, Theo travels the world now, and here's a big philosophical chapter on the meaning of life from the perspective...
And the preservation of art.
Like, bitch, you think I care? You think I care? Oh my god, I was so mad. I was just so angry that this, like, after everything I just went through, this bitch is going like, maybe the meaning of life is like a painting. Shut up!
No, the meaning of life is that there are just some things that, like, even, like, if they're burning in a fire, you would pull them out to save them because you care about them that much.
Wow. Leap Year had that same... The film A Leap Year had that exact same message.
Just for the record, I really love the Goldfinch. I'm just letting her do her thing, but I do really love the Goldfinch in this whole story anyway.
I do like it.
Because I'm pretentious as fuck and I read all of the secret history.
Oh my god.
Okay, continue.
I'm just not a pretentious enough gay, I think.
I know.
Like, I am in some things, but not in this. Not with art, I don't think. I think, like paint art. Obviously not art in general. Yeah. But, like, with paint art, I just...
Paint art.
I'm sorry, but it just, I don't know. It didn't go down. Mostly because I think I'm just angry that everything got sold for Theo that quickly. I think he should have had to have done something else to get that money. He should have still had to square off with Lucius Reeve.
Well, you know what, Mary? That's just how life is.
For white men.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough, I suppose. Maybe it's a commentary on that, really.
It is. This book is about life.
Yeah.
It is about a life. It's a character study.
It's
is. Not, you think this is a story with plot? No, it's a character study.
Yeah. True, it's still a better character study than Joker 2019. Oh my god, sorry. I'm still can't get over I saw that movie and that movie was made.
How could you mention that on GayV Club is a safe space. I can't believe you would even deign to I'm
sorry, but it doesn't have to be said. I don't know why I said it. But no, that's our pitch. And we'll basically end with a nice narration and I think a nice zoom, like a nice slow zoom on the painting. Yeah. Restored.
Yeah.
To where it should be.
Yeah.
And, just everyone sort of living their life. Because doesn't Boris just travel? Not Boris, sorry. Theo, doesn't he just travel around now? What does he do?
I thought Theo just kept, goes, back to his life in New York and Boris continues his shady business, which involves a lot of travel. And
no, but Theo's doing a lot of travel as well. I think he's, buying antiques overseas and stuff.
Possibly, yeah. I forget now.
Yeah. So, I don't know, they end up having good lives, I guess, relatively.
Yeah.
We were discussing yesterday how I don't think that Theo and Boris should be together, at the end.
No, they shouldn't, and they aren't. This is going to be the most lesbian thing I've ever said, but, I do actually like the idea of, a long distance, every few months type of thing. Yeah, I do like that it's kind of open. I like how it's only explained, in a very brief paragraph, but Theo gets sick and he goes back to Boris's place and, Boris is giving him, penicillin shots and, they're watching old movies and it's, old times.
Like old times, yeah. And,
the boys.
Yeah, the boys. The boys are back in town. And yeah, that's our Goldfinch pitch.
Yeah, that's what I would have liked to have seen, but unfortunately we were not.
Essentially, detail. It boils down to detail in chronological order, directed by Joe Wright. That's it.
With respect to gay people, without straight washing, and just having a lot more fun with the concepts that you have.
Yeah. Also, not cheaping out on my boy Andy.
Yeah.
Or Boris, because Boris was cheaped out in the movie as well.
Boris was so underdeveloped. It was quite sad.
But yes, so that's our episode. Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Contact us on the socials if you like.
Yeah, Instagram and Twitter at GayV_club. Next episode is actually going to be our last episode of the year.
Yes.
Then we're going to take a short break and then come back in January. But next episode is going to be our decade in review of LGBT cinema.
And also things we're looking forward to next year. Yeah. And it's going to be fun. We were originally going to do a year in review, but then we realized, no, we're coming to the end of a decade. Yeah. We're about to enter the roaring 20. Where do you stand on the debate of there are people that think the decade doesn't start until 2021.
No, it starts at 0.
You reckon I reckon it starts at 0.
It starts at the 0.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And as also, if you have anything you'd like us to talk about on the podcast, hit us up on the socials. Go watch something nice and be good and be safe.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Bye.